you're getting into a space where, all right, now it's serious. Like
It's serious.
if you're
It's money on the
18, yeah,
table.
if you're 18 and trying to learn and you mess up your partner, no, it's a wrap.
That is funny. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching my cousin play spades for like money, and we were like kids. I was like, sis, be great. I'll do something else, but you got that car. And then when people can start getting serious, I'm like, no, no, no. I'm not messing with y'all.
Yeah.
Y'all take it. It's a card game.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Black Student Success Podcast, where we bring you insight and guidance from successful Black professionals and students. My name is Selvin, and of course, we appreciate your support. So today we have Syreeta Gates on the show. She is an archivist. She's a creative and the founder of the Gates Preserve. And so she's going to talk about what she does exactly and all the things that motivate her to kind of do the things as an archivist. And, you know, it's a lot of cool things that she's into. So we're going to get into that. So Syreeta, nice to meet you and welcome to the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. Could have been anything in the world.
Yeah. Appreciate it. So we're going to start the show how we always do by asking, who is Syreeta Gates?
Syreeta Gates is Jessie Mae Jones Doherty's granddaughter. She is Brenda Gates' daughter. I am a Queens native. I'm passionate about creating what's missing in the culture. I'm committed to creating, just being an example of what's possible in any field that you want to do, or any field that you want to be in. So that is, I'm also Aquarius, Black Aquarius, are very different. Shout out to us. That's who I am.
Appreciate it. So let's start from the beginning. What was your family dynamic like? And, you know, what types of those qualities that kind of built you into the person that you are now?
Yeah, for sure. I love talking about my family all the time and often. It's actually what got me into archiving. But I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens. I grew up with my mom. And I have a crazy large family. Like, I'm a descendant of Joneses. So, you know, Black folks and Joneses go the longest of ways. But yeah, I grew up, like, I remember like going to my grandmother's house, going to my godmother's house, going to aunties and uncles' houses growing up. And I would say a large part of who I am today is really based on 4 people in 3 generations. So one, my grandmother, born in 1926, Jessie Mae Jones Doherty. She participated in a Great Migration from North Carolina, and she landed in Harlem. She really taught me about the importance of like service and having service look the way you want it to look versus what it should look like. And really just kept a notion around this philosophy around giving more, right? And so that's always been at the heart. So, and my grandmother was like the most jiggy woman I've ever seen. Like, I think she definitely took rappers to task just as far as being like super iced out, mink coat on, like super jiggy. So that's my grandmother. My mother, born in 1950, born in Harlem, raised in Brooklyn. My mother really taught me not only how to be a creative, but what it might look like. My mother was a social worker by trade. She's retired. She's been retired for a minute, but she's a photographer now, right? And she's always, similar to my grandmother, has been tapped in on service. But I think I learned from my mother and all of the people that I'm going to talk about, the importance of like quality relationships and gratitude. So I always say, like, gratitude gang. I'm always thankful. I try to be as intentional about as possible as to have like gratitude reflect how I move in the world. And similarly to building relationships, right? Like, I'm the person you could count on to text you and be like, hey, just hope all is well. Yeah. That's it. Like, I don't need anything. Just checking up on you. So that's what my grandmother, my mother, like, taught me and instilled in me. And then the last 2 guys, I always get the year that they were born wrong. I think it's 1968, but my two uncles. One was born at the top of the year, JD, and my uncle Zoo was born at the bottom of the year in December. And so these dudes gave me one being front row at the game, which meant like if I remember one of my uncles telling me, like, if you're bored in New York City, it's not New York City, it's you. I was like, oh, heard you, got it. So just being an active participant in my own life, just as far as like, oh, I want to see a play, go see the play. I want to go to the record game, go to the record game. I want to go to this concert, do the things that you enjoy to do, and take risk and explore things that you might never know that it could be something that you're interested in. So that's one thing my uncles taught me. My uncles also taught me, like, they were my intro to hip hop. So I often share that, and every time I'm talking about my uncles, I'm always talking about my mother's brother. But my two uncles grew up in a house with my older cousin. And so she was more like their sister than their niece. And so the three of them, and I used to be at my grandmother's house all the time. So the three of them were really pivotal because one had all the magazines. Like the first time I ever seen Bob magazine, it was at his house. The first time I really was like, oh, cassettes are a thing. He had like the Sega Genesis case, and you open them, it's like, a plethora of cassettes. So that's one uncle. But my other uncle and my cousin together, I had to be like maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. I remember I had to be like 96, and I hear it's the Jeeps. The light scoops, the beam was in the Benz. Infamous Lost Boy song. My uncle had an SC400 King Lexus at the time. He walks in the house with a Versace silk shirt with the matching shades on, and my big cousin has on the DKNY bodysuit. And if you know anything about hip hop, they're giving Biggie and Kim energy. And so I was like, listen, I don't know what y'all are down with, but I need to be down with that. Yeah. So I always credit my uncles for gifting me, my uncles and my big cousin for gifting me hip hop. So my family obviously has taught me a lot. They're super ingrained into like how I move through the world, and certainly what I believe in.
Yeah, there's a lot in all of the people that you talked about. There's elements of this energy that you put out and then you eventually get back when you're talking about the gratitude, the service, the essence of, just what Versace shades mean, so there's a lot of things and if you even look at all of your artwork and the different things within your portfolio, you can definitely see those things. And so I definitely want our guests or our audience to know what that actually looks like. And so for you to explain that in the essence of your family, I think is really awesome. So thank you for that. Now, you've taken all these things and you looks like you've created a career out of it, out of archiving. But what was really the motivation to actually get onto that path with all of those experiences that you have?
That's a great question. So three things. One, I'm really committed to creating what's missing in the culture, right? Whether it's Black and brown culture, hip hop culture, period. But two things happened that led me into archiving specifically. One, 3 days after my 21st birthday, my grandmother died. And so it was like a grueling death. It was like the worst. Like I was hella close to my grandmother. So I was like, why is this happening? And so when she died, I had dropped out of college, then went back later. But during the time that she was like transitioning, I decided to go back to school. And it was, I think possibly being in school, or maybe it wasn't. I was just always thinking like, how can I ensure that my grandmother lasts forever? Right? Like I said, my grandmother was born in 1926. You could probably, like during that time, you could not Google my grandmother and something come up. That wasn't going to happen. So I always had this notion of how do I ensure that she lasts forever? And I realized some cheat codes. I was like, oh, if I donate to a Kickstarter that's in alignment with who she is, such as Black vintage glamour, I was like, I'm going to put my grandmother's name versus putting my name. If I get interviewed, I think I had did an article in like the Daily News. It was like my first paper article, full page. And I mentioned my grandmother's whole name in the article. And so like when I wrote my first book, I did the same. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna just talk about her all the time. Great. Yeah. So that was kind of, that was one way. And I was playing with what was possible as far as archiving. But the second way is I've been working on this documentary around hip hop journalism. And how I got into it was essentially I had two problems. One, I didn't know, three problems. One, I didn't know any hip hop journalists. So at that time, my mentor had gave me like a few names. She said, you got to know about Greg Tate, Joe Morgan, Dream Hampton, Nelson George. You have to know about Danielle Smith and Karen Mayo and Elliot Wilson. So I was like, whoa. Okay, cool. And when I started to do research, I realized two things was happening. One, I couldn't find significant information about the writers themselves. And then two, I couldn't find their work online. So that led me to collecting. So I have every issue of, you name the magazine, I have every issue of it. Vibe, The Source, Ego Trip, Honey, et cetera, et cetera. And so during that time, when I started shooting the film, I would ask writers to read their pieces. Hey, Babito Garcia, read Confessions of a Sneakerhead, which was the first article written on sneakers and sneaker culture, period, right? Read this article. Hey, Karen Mayo, read this piece that you did on Dolores Tucker, et cetera, et cetera. So after I was doing those for a while, one, I realized the writers didn't have their own work. Right. And sometimes they'll be like, yo, can you scan that and send it to me? But two, I was at a wedding with the brilliant Dream Hampton, who's an activist, who's a writer, who's from Detroit. She's a filmmaker. And she was like, you're like a hip hop archivist. And I was like, I don't know any archivists. I have no context for what that might look like at all. So because the stars were aligned, and I feel like my grandmother was definitely looking out for me, it was during that time where I believe all of the answers are in the acknowledgments in books and the credits in films. And so Beyonce had just dropped Lemonade, and I watched all the credits, and I saw she has an archivist. I was like, oh, let me find out more. Because I want to do what she does for, I want to do what her archivist, and her archivist name was Britain. I want to do what she does for Beyonce, for like all the Black and brown people shaking things up in hip hop and out of hip hop, right? And so I went to the school Britain went to. My whole goal was to launch the Gates Preserve and meet Britain. Like, that's it. And that was really my introduction into archiving. And I think being that I didn't have a traditional path, or I never saw myself working for an institution, I was like, oh, I could do whatever I want. And this is really a space to be in. So it's allowed me to bridge starting the Gates Preserve as a whole, in which it's a multimedia experience company committed to archiving and preserving hip hop in such a way that lasts forever. Our three major pillars are archive, media, and experience. So everything that I've ever done, can fit under it. I'm like, oh, we do a culinary competition that bridges hip hop and food called Yo Stay Hungry. Boom, let's throw that under the experiences. We've been doing all these films, bet. Media. In the archive, we get to support brilliant minds whose work you know and love, with archiving and preserving their work so that it lasts forever. So I was like, oh yeah, I could do this for a while. This is life's work. It feels good. And I still get to honor my grandmother in that way, always and often. So that's how I got into archiving.
Yeah. Well, first of all, condolences, for your grandmother. And I think that the one question that you asked, how do you make her last forever is super deep, and it's at the core, what it seems like, of the Gates Preserve. So it's really cool to see how you've turned that into something, again, based off of your interest in hip hop and collecting information and learning history. And especially what you can do for the present as well as the future when it comes to the things that you put together. I like how you infuse that multimedia piece into it to kind of keep things present with the traditional aspect of collecting information and documents and artifacts and things like that, and putting it together in a way where you can, like you said, create an experience, teach people, and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So now with you, like you said, not taking that traditional route into archiving, but you having all of this experience in terms of the techniques and then, the outcomes of what, you as an archivist does, what other variations of this career path or career field can students take if they're thinking about getting into the space of like getting information, for themselves or for some type of establishment?
Absolutely. I think one, I must say I'm very much a create your own lane type of woman, right? I'm like, what is the problem that you have? Solve for that. And so that will allow you to sit in a space by yourself. There are I know hella Black and brown archivists who are brilliant. I'm grateful to call them friends. I'm grateful to call them colleagues. But oftentimes we do different work, right? Like what you are able to do in the confines of the institution that you work for is significantly different than what I'm able to do. So one, I love to be able to like partner with people in a variety of capacities, because sometimes people just be needing that creative outlet. And so to answer your question around what's possible if you are in the space of organizing and or collecting materials and or being an archivist as a whole, I would say it's really up to you to figure out what your limitations are. Like, what do you imagine is possible in this space? I can say, yes, you can absolutely be an archivist for an institution, for a person, for a brand. You can be an archival producer, which is in film. You can, I'm like, what else? And I might actually be limited to those two things because I'm not even in that space, right? Like, yeah, we do some at the Gates Preserve, we do some archival producing, but I'm like, I do whatever I want. So I don't know if I'm the best person to like ask that question. I would say figure out what it is that you're passionate about, and until it's core, right? Like I'm passionate about research and like organizing things. Cool. Yeah, it makes sense for me to be an archivist. But if you have that like foundation and you're clear, and you'll get clearer as you age. And also the thing that you are clear with at 17 might not be the thing that you're clear with at 18 or 21. So give yourself space to evolve your interests and your passions. But yeah, if you create your own lane, you're literally here by yourself. So anything is possible, right? Like the work, like, yes, I'm an archivist, but I'm in culinary, I'm in toys, I'm in what media, I'm in live experiences, right? Like those are the things that I enjoy. So I was like, oh, how can I just position myself to where I'm in everything, but it makes sense, right? Like the root of everything that I'm involved with is hip hop. Yo, Stay Hungry, hip hop. Me and my partner, Ramsey Wilson, we build these limited edition hip hop sculptures. That's most incredible. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've literally created like this world that I choose to live in.
Yeah, I think the highlight from that is the fact that you have it grounded in the organizing information. And I think sometimes we get caught up in trying to find the exact job or the exact career when you can even go a little bit deeper than that. It's like, I just like organizing things. And then there's a ton of things that you can kind of get into with that. Yours just happens to be, information and things that are embedded in hip hop culture, which you've got, even though it's not as old as many other cultures, there's still a lot of information, a lot of holes to fill and things like that. So, so that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, for sure. I think even to your point, like when you explore what are the skills that you have, you can do whatever you want, right? So I'm like, I would say my skills are like organizing. My skills are putting teams together. My skill is I can implement anything. Like those are some of the things where it's like, okay, she can implement anything. She can organize. Like I could be a manager for a rapper, or I could do something at NASA. Like it's literally it knows no bounds. But when you are clear, you have a certain level of clarity around what you are good at, you can figure anything out. Sure.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. So this next question actually comes from our intern, Bria. So shout outs to her. She's, in this space or trying to figure out what she wants to do in this space. And she asked, how do you find a community within this field? You probably had an opportunity to connect with different archivists and things like that, and maybe collaborate in some aspects. But what would you say is the best way to kind of find a community, within this space?
To find your people. I would say you have to be all in it. Like so I learned this lesson this is hella random, but I worked on this community service project. I put together my first mural when I was like 17. I was like my first entry into organizing work. And I was like, all right, so I got this wall. I don't know any graffiti artists. Like I knew no graffiti artists. My uncle gave me a book, and it wasn't like I was following them on Instagram. Like none of that stuff existed, but we were outside. Shout out to not being in the Pizza Hut. And so they would have events that I would find out about. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go to, speaking of being front row at the game that my uncles always talked about. I was like, oh, I'm going to just go to all of the events. So whoever you think your tribe is, where do they congregate? Where are they at? Right? Like where do they drink coffee in a particular place? Do they all have membership to a particular house? Did they go to a specific school, et cetera, et cetera? I think it also reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors, like of all time. And in his book, The Tipping Point, he talks about being salesman, maven, and connectors. I would say I'm a combination of all of those three. But the connector is really important, right? The connector is the person that's like, oh, you're interested in, you need to connect with so-and-so because you say you want to work for NASA and my friend works for NASA. But the only reason that the connector is able to connect people with other people in a variety of different fields is because they are in a variety of different fields, right? It's because they have said, okay, I'm interested in culinary arts. And I'm interested in flying, like literally flying in the air. And I'm interested in sneaker culture. And I'm interested in travel. And so they have little pockets of communities everywhere. So all that to say, where are the people? Like, if you want to be an archivist, where are the archivists? Are there groups? Are there on Twitter? And also, don't be afraid to reach out to people. I'm queen of reaching out to people I don't know. I'm like, yeah, I don't know you, but love your work. I see you, sis. I see you doing that work, and that's also how you build your community.
Yeah. So just really at the core of that, it sounds like it's just, networking, and then based off of kind of what those interests that you have, once you've established that, and then you're finding, okay, where are the people who are also interested in such and such? Where do they, hang out? Where do they, go online and congregate and things like that? And then, like you said, those different pockets of networks and just kind of building off of those networks to meet more people.
Yeah. And I would say, ask your friends, who do they know that you need to meet? Because when you said network, I was like, I hate network. I never want to network ever in life. I suck at it. Though it seems like I'm great at being an extrovert, I'm an introvert. I'm like, if I could stay and be by myself, I'll be good to go, right? And so what has been helpful as being an introvert and me knowing that I can do both, being an introvert and be an extrovert, I was like, okay, connect. I just want my friends to connect me with other people.
Yeah.
Right? So because I was in a program, I went to NYU, they have a moving image archiving and preservation program. I went to the program going to meet Britain. In the program, I met other archivists. And now I literally, and you don't have to pay $90 million to create your community. You can reach out to the professors that are working at a school, reach out to a club that is in the school. You don't think school is the answer. It's not always the answer to creating your tribe, but yeah, utilize the things and people that you have around you to connect you with other people. outside of Britain, one of the first archivists that I met, brilliant guy. His name is Syreeta Gates. I met him through my homeboy. That's a rapper. Like, has nothing to do with archiving. He was like, oh, no, I think I should connect you with my boy Jared. He does that, archiving. Yeah, that's him. And after I met Jared was like, oh, let me introduce you to all of the archivists. Oh. I was like, oh, okay, great. This is good. I like this.
There you go. Yeah, it's fun when it gets into a snowball effect like that. Mm-hmm. So that's what's up. Now, with all these things that you do and, you know, your philosophies, everything that you built over time, how do you define success? You know, what does that look like for you? You know, some people have it in a monetary sense. Some people have it in a certain number of goals that they attain, or it's just a state of being for them. But what is success for you?
That's a great question. I feel like at a variety of points in my life, it was specific things. It was like, oh, millionaire by 21, husband and kids by 25, billionaire by 30, etc. Houses, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff. At this point, I'm like, success looks like being healthy. And this sounds like super corny, but I'm like, if you're not taking care of your health, you can't do anything. Like, everything is a dud, right? So it's like being healthy, building like quality relationships with folks, doing work that I love, getting compensated generously for that work that I'm doing, and being able to dictate how I want to move through the world, like not having to compromise who I am to do A, B, C, D, or E. Like, I can move with intention. I can show gratitude. I can be true to myself in any space that I'm in. That these days looks like what success for me would look like. Being able to put people on, being able to work with brilliant young people, in which hopefully they can cut me a check instead of the other way around. They are so exceptional that I'm like, listen, let me just take this off your hands. You got it. You do more stuff in the world. I think that is what success looks like for me.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, health is wealth. I don't think you can get any deeper than that. So that's
you can get another body.
Yeah, no, you only come with one. So that's what's up. All right. So there's one final question, just to have the listeners learn more about you a little bit more. And you talked a lot about being in hip hop culture, and you take a look at your art, and you got Black culture all over that. But what's one thing that would get your Black card revoked?
It's hella stuff, honestly. I don't know how to braid, which is ridiculous. I'm double-handed. I can't turn I can't turn a rope for double dutch, and I can't jump. So that's like two. I'm ridiculous. I also can't really play spades. Like, the last time I played spades, I was like in 8th grade. And so I kind of like stay out that area completely. Those are 3 pivotal things that would get my Black card revoked. Yeah.
You hear the spades one a lot more than you think. I think once you get to a certain age, it's harder to learn because you're getting into a space where, all right, now it's serious. Like, if you're 18, if you're 18 and trying to learn and you mess up your partner, no, it's a wrap.
That is funny. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching my cousin play spades for like money, and we were like kids. I was like, sis, be great. I'll do something else, but you got that card. And then when people start getting serious, I'm like, no. I'm not messing with y'all. Yeah. Y'all take it. It's a card game.
Mm-hmm. Spectator sport. That's I'll be on the side watching. So,
right. Yeah. So need a plate of food.
Exactly. So, Syreeta, that's all I got for you. So, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your experience and everything that you have done. I'm going to give you an opportunity to, let people know where people can find you. Any last words that you have for our audience, and everything that goes with that.
Cool. I would say final words: be great. Gratitude is always the thing. And most importantly, you can't compensate for doing the work. You must do the work. You can find me on all the things, all the Googles, Syreeta Gates, thegatespreserve.com, yosehungry.com, Most Incredible Studio. It's spelled weird, but it's for people that love Lego. So
yeah.
And that's what I'm at.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for just, sharing everything. Thanks to all of our listeners and watchers. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That's at Inquire Hire. And you can check out our website, inquirehire.com. So until next time, peace.
Cheers, y'all.